and it's time to unstick the system. There are 111 days until December 1st, the day the city has promised to have enough beds operational to ensure no person suffers and dies on our streets this winter.
Okay, the countdown is on. Mayor Keith Wilson once again doubling down on his plan to get all homeless people off our streets and into some kind of shelter or housing by December 1st. There are around 15,000 people experiencing homelessness in Multnomah County, more than 6,000 of them in Portland. Today, Mayor Wilson faced the City Council Committee on Housing and Homelessness to give an update on his plan. Okay, let's dive in. The first goal is ending tent distribution, which the mayor says is, quote, mostly complete. After years of heated back and forth on this particular issue, Multnomah County has stopped handing out tents, except during extreme weather. When it comes to groups the city hires to deal with the crisis, their contracts now bar them from handing out tents as well. Only certain county and private groups continue to hand them out. The mayor calling it a, quote, harmful practice.
I'm grateful for the county's action on this, and I'd ask that you set a standard that no service providers funded by the county dollars distribute tents. I'll do my part by providing a better option, but we need to set a uniform expectation and standard across the city and the county.
Okay, let's pause here for a moment because that piece is noteworthy. The city was in potential violation of a legal settlement for allowing city-hired contractors to hand out tents. The city was sued several years back by a group of Portlanders with mobility disabilities over tents blocking ADA access on public sidewalks. Well, that ended in a settlement agreement. The attorney representing those Portlanders with disabilities told me today that they gave the mayor some time to make changes before they went back to court. He says, we applaud the mayor's efforts to eliminate the practice of handing out tents and finally persuading the county chair that these practices only enable homelessness. We will monitor how effectively the city and county follow through on this pledge. Okay, next, the mayor talked about diversion. That's his term for reuniting homeless people back with their families. He says that is in progress. The mayor wants to reunite at least 14 homeless people with loved ones each week.
Our 2023 point in time count is clear. Out of those who answered the question, where were you last housed? 26% were from out of state. That is a number highly supported by anecdotal information from outreach workers and shelter providers. In the last 3 days, we helped reunite people with their loved ones to Detroit, Michigan, Dover, Delaware, and yesterday, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Then there's the mayor's push to open emergency shelter beds, 1,500 by December 1st. By the end of this summer, the mayor says the city will have opened 630 new shelter beds at 6 different locations, plus 2 day centers. Data shows in the last 7 months, 2 of the existing city shelters are more than 70% full each night. He also wants to focus on the impacts to the communities where the city shelters are located. Now, I've covered a lot of shelter openings here in Portland, and this part is always tricky because neighbors want homeless people to have shelter, just not in their backyard.
As part of my budget that council approved, we are hiring 10 city outreach professionals. This team is deployed each morning to each of our shelters to determine if there are any issues and work with participants.
And then there's his focus on cleaning up the streets. The city recently hired de-escalation teams to tag along with camp removal crews.
We can't afford to continue to remove 10 million pounds of trash every year. The Statue of Liberty weighs 440,000 pounds. We dispose of the equivalent of trash every 2 weeks. The majority of that is coming from encampments.
The mayor also talked of the city's RV task force, which removes 38 unsafe RVs per month. The city has the money to increase that to 96 per month. Now, something else that was brought up today was how the mayor effectively ended the enforcement of the city's camping ban, also known as the Time, Place, and Manner Ordinance. So basically, if shelter is offered and available and someone repeatedly refuses while camping on city property, they would be arrested and taken to jail, fined, or both. Well, Mayor Wilson stopped that enforcement back in February, and we learned today it has only been enforced 40 times since it went into effect during Ted Wheeler's administration, resulting in just 2 arrests.
I'm wondering when we're going to see the meat of what these enforcement zones look like in terms of cleanliness, exclusion for drug dealing. I don't really want to keep hearing about the story of how we think it will go. I'm looking for examples for like, here's how I deployed PBOT to wash the streets every morning, BES to put more trash cans in that area, graffiti abatement to occur. I want to be able to share examples with my residents, and I don't have those right now. And coupling that with the fact that you turned off time, place, manner enforcement, I need your help to be able to convey that to my district, and I'm not feeling like I've got the cards to do that right now.
And you're right, I'm not a law and order guy because those are my neighbors, all right? So I'm gonna provide care and concern for those first with access to services so we can help people with their journey in life. So you're seeing a slow, methodical approach to a plan that's not reactionary, that's not draconian, but you're seeing a stepped process of us re-engaging and improving livability, but providing access to care as our primary first response.
Now, another sticking point today was whether Multnomah County is holding up their end of this fight as well. Now, they have a goal to open roughly 1,000 shelter beds by the end of this year, but it was hard for counselors to get a clear answer on where that currently stands. Listen.
They're not there yet, but I'm getting some encouraging emails.
Can you give me a number though? Like, where are they in their goal?
You know, it's opaque right now. I don't.
About 500, so.
They're at 500.
Chair and Councilor Ryan, I have to interject. I think we need to say, what is the county's actual goal now? Because it was 1,000 in the IGA, and at our last several SOCs, we have seen that's not the goal. I don't think Councilor Ryan is asking for platitudes. I think he's asking for a real number. How has the county changed their sheltering goal?
I phoned a friend here. But anyway, are they at 500?
Yeah.
And like Councilor Zimmerman, I want to know, are they urgent about reaching their goal? Are they focused on this?
Working with them every single week, every single conversation I have is about meeting that 1,000 shelter bed goal.
Okay, so the county's committed to reaching the goal of 1,000 shelter beds by the end of this calendar year.
I can't speak for them, Counselor, but that is their promise, and we must hold them accountable to that promise.
All right, joining me live now is Councilor Angelita Murillo. She represents District 3 in Southeast Portland and was part of that meeting today. Councilor Murillo, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, so your website notes that you once experienced homelessness yourself here in Portland. So with that in mind, what do you make of the mayor's mainly shelter first plan here?
I think that I admire the mayor's tenacity in trying to tackle a very complicated and difficult problem, but I have concerns about the fact that we are choosing to primarily focus on shelter instead of getting people into long-term housing. There are just a lot of holes that I see in the plan that I am concerned about, like the 90-day stay limit. I know from doing constituent services, I know from having been unhoused myself, and I know from working with houseless folks that it often takes longer than 90 days for people to actually get into services. If we look at Social Security benefits that are being passed down from the federal government, most of those benefits are taking about 7 months to reach people. And that was prior to a Trump administration that is completely dysfunctional when it comes to social services, right? So if you're putting a 90-day limit and people don't have the resources to stay housed, then how is that going to work besides becoming a revolving door where people are going into our shelters and then having to immediately exit and then go back in again?
And is that what you see in the mayor's plan, that people will go into emergency shelter, stay for 90 days, and then potentially end up on the streets?
He claims that under his plan, they are going to be able to stay in the shelter for 90 days and that every single person is going to be connected to the services they need and get sent to long-term housing, right? But that is not materially how it's going to work out in practice, because what my office has been seeing is that there is no rent assistance, there is no funding to help those people who are otherwise completely stable but are having a medical crisis that caused them to have an emergency medical fund or something that didn't allow them to pay rent, right? I had a mother of 3 email my office this week who told us that she simply did not get rent assistance because of cuts from the state and federal government, and suddenly her family is trying to figure out what to do. And our office exhausted every possible resource to try to get her assistance. And the only assistance that we could give her at the end of the day was to tell her that that maybe she should go into a shelter if that is available or open. And that's unacceptable for people who are suffering on our streets. So the resources don't exist for that kind of continuum to happen right now because the state, federal, and local governments have chosen not to fund them.
Do you think the city will meet the December 1st deadline of opening these 1,500 shelter beds?
I think that City Council is prepared to do anything we can to help Mayor Wilson achieve that goal. But I think for me, the more important question is, what are we going to do to get people into long-term housing? Because putting people into shelter is not housing. That is resolving an aesthetic problem of homelessness. It is not addressing the root causes and keeping people housed long-term.
And earlier today, you brought up that 1,500 shelter beds doesn't even match the number of people on our streets. It's not even close. And the mayor responded to you by saying, if there needs to be more beds, we'll add more beds, but he didn't know how many beds that would be. What did you make of that response?
I think that response shows that if the goal is 1,500 shelter beds, and we know that is woefully inadequate for the number of people on our streets, then the next question to me logically becomes, how are we going to get all of these people into shelter and housing? And what happens to the people on our streets who are not able to access a shelter bed? Because we know that Mayor Wilson's administration is doing more sweeps than even Mayor Wheeler's administration had done before his. And that sweeps have been proven to be quite violent for the people who are on the ground. They lead to a lot of overdoses from people who are disconnected from resources and community suddenly. They lead to a lot of people losing their paperwork and identification, making it harder for them to keep job stability. So this has all been covered in numerous studies. There was an article by Kay Rambo from Street Roots and ProPublica covering the impacts of sweeps on our unhoused population. And I think that we need to be very critical of this practice, how expensive it is, and make sure that we are taking care of people at the very beginning so that they can stay housed rather than having to help them get into housing once they are on our streets.
And I've talked to many homeless people myself, firsthand heard how difficult and harmful these sweeps can be on people. Do you think they will increase the camp removals once 1,500 beds are open, if they ever open?
I think that is a question for Mayor Wilson, but I sure hope that they do not, because they are incredibly harmful. And again, as someone who did constituent services in City Hall and answered so many people's calls and emails about different encampments in their neighborhood, what happens when you do a sweep is you simply move those people from street to street, and then they come back right where they started because there's nowhere for them to go. So unless we are actually providing alternatives and all varieties of housing and shelter to get people's needs met, then you are simply going to push people from corner to corner, and you are going to actually make it more difficult to get them back on their feet. You're not going to resolve the homelessness issue. It is going to be an aesthetic fix.
So what was your take on how the county is doing to hold up their end of the bargain by opening 1,000 beds by the end of this year? Are you confident that they'll reach that goal?
I really hope that our county partners follow through on their promises. I think that every local government needs to pull through on what they said they were going to do. And if those agreements were made, then those agreements need to be held up.
Do you think the city should still pay into the intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, with Multnomah County when it comes to addressing homelessness?
I think we need to evaluate how we're working together and make sure that people are following through on their promises. And I think that when you see people follow through on those promises, then yeah, you should maintain those relationships. I think it's quite easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it is much more difficult to stand up a complicated system where you are working together on numerous things. It's much easier to take it down than it is to build something new back up.
And what would you do for those who refuse the offer of shelter?
I think that we need to be asking people why they're refusing shelter. In my experience, the majority of people that are refusing shelter, it's because they can't bring their kids, they can't bring their pets. The hours that they are required to come in or leave are actually interrupting their ability to find or maintain work. Some people have told me about shelter conditions that are really brutal, that they don't want to be in. I had lunch with houseless youth in my district just last week, and they were telling me about how some of the shelters have black mold that the shelter system simply paints over so you don't see it, but it's still there. People get scabies, people get lice, people with disabilities have a really hard time accessing the shelter spaces. People also sometimes experience theft or physical violence. There are a lot of reasons why it is actually safer sometimes when you're an unhoused person to have some autonomy and maintain control when you're on the street than there is within a shelter system. And the fact that that is even something that I have heard repeatedly from unhoused people and that I experienced myself means that we need to do something to rectify the shelter system and why people don't want to use our resources in the first place.
Okay, Councilor Murillo, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
All right, talk to us. What's going through your mind? What do you think about the mayor's homeless plan or anything you just heard from Councilor Murillo? Email us at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090.